This old pair of Levi's is considered to be the holy grail of vintage jeans amongst collectors. Found inside an abandoned gold mine in New Mexico, the pair dating back to the 1880s were sold at auction for $87,000. They're flecked with wax from when the original owner labored for hours over candlelight. This hand weapon built from shark teeth and wood was made in Hawaii circa 1778. Discovered in northern England, here's a 2,000-year-old toy sword that likely belonged to a child from ancient Rome. The Kassar Draw in Algeria is an ancient ruin that stands out in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Its age, history, and origins have been almost completely lost over time. Here's an example of a Japanese bunraku puppet that was used in theaters across Osaka throughout the early 1600s. During Victorian times, prostitutes would sometimes use brothel candles that burned for approximately 7 minutes. The customer would pay the fee, light the candle, and when it burned out, the session was over. In 1904, 21-year-old Oda Banga was abducted from a tribe in the Congo and transported to the Bronx Zoo, where he was put on display alongside monkeys. He was placed in a small cage with an orangutan as an apparent depiction of evolution. Oda was given a functional bow and arrow to enhance his primitive image and to protect himself from the ape if necessary. Since visitors were far more interested in Oda than the actual animals at the zoo, the exhibit was extremely popular and began shattering attendance records. The zoo started seeing an average attendance of over 200,000 people per month, most of whom headed straight to the primate house to catch a glimpse of Oda Banga. But by 1906, Oda was finally released from his torment thanks to mass public outcry from the black community. A few years later, he attempted to return to Africa, but his plans were thwarted by World War I. After struggling to assimilate into American society, Oda fell into a deep depression and tragically ended up taking his own life in 1916. In 2007, Navy SEAL Mike Day was shot 27 times by 4 members of Al-Qaeda before being knocked out by a grenade. Not only did he survive, but Mike even ended up killing all 4 of the militants and walked away on his own after regaining consciousness. Jeremiah Clarke was a British composer who couldn't decide whether to take his own life by drowning or hanging himself, so he flipped a coin. The coin landed on its edge in the mud, so he went home and shot himself instead. Squeezing someone's testicles very tightly can have roughly the same effect as using an EpiPen, but I wouldn't suggest doing this because it could also kill them. Your body is the weakest from 3 to 4 a.m., making this the time when most people die in their sleep. Dutchman Dirk Willems was a religious prisoner who escaped his execution in 1569. When the guard chasing him fell through the ice in a nearby river, Willems turned around to save him. He was then recaptured and burned at the stake. French journalist Victor Noir is more famous for his grave than his work. In 1870, he was shot dead by Napoleon's nephew and had a grave erected of him lying down as if he was just killed. Because of an obvious bulge in its pants, the grave has become a popular fertility symbol among women. Legend tells that those who kiss the statue on the lips, place a flower in his hat, and rub the genital area will experience enhanced fertility. As a result, the lips and bulge are noticeably shiny from the thousands of people who have followed the legend over the years. Jeffrey Dahmer refused to eat people with tattoos because he said the ink made the flesh taste weird. Be safe, get inked. In 1979, 16-year-old Brenda Ann Spencer killed 2 people and injured 9 others with a rifle at a San Diego elementary school. When asked why she did it, her response was, "I just don't like Mondays." In 1973, a Hindu man named Amar Bharati raised his hand as a religious gesture and hasn't put it down ever since. He spent 2 years of his life in severe pain by doing this, but eventually lost all sensation in his arm until it just stayed up. During the war, Pope Pius XII told the United States that he couldn't confirm reports that Germany was executing Jews. But in 2020, newly declassified documents revealed that he was lying and knew that the Holocaust was happening all along. Here's a photo of a Japanese boy waiting for his turn to cremate his dead little brother towards the end of the war. When the guard said, "Give me that load, boy," he replied saying, "It's not cargo, sir, he's my brother." After escaping from a POW camp, Australian soldier Robert Kerr McLaren removed his own appendix in the middle of a Philippine jungle. He did it without any anesthetic and only used a razor blade, mirror, and plant fibers for stitches. The operation took 4.5 hours to perform and he made a full recovery. British mathematician and computer scientist Alan Turing is the man who cracked the Enigma code during World War II. He's estimated to have shortened the war by at least 2 years and to have saved 14 million lives. But despite his heroism, he was later charged for being a homosexual and forced to undergo chemical castration. 2 years later, he took his own life by drinking cyanide. Arnold Schwarzenegger had a brother named Maynard who was favored by their Nazi father but died in a drunk driving crash when he was 24. Arnold didn't attend his brother's funeral or his father's. In 1980, a Las Vegas hospital had to suspend workers for betting on when patients would die. One nurse was even accused of murdering a patient so she would win. The extremely venomous blue-ringed octopus has enough venom to kill 10 grown adults. Its deadly neurotoxin can result in patients being fully aware of their surroundings but unable to move. Because of the paralysis, you have no way of signaling for help or indicating distress. There's no anti-venom for the bite, but if you can get a ventilator to breathe for you for 16 hours, you will survive with no side effects. In 2012, the cruise ship Costa Concordia collided with a rock off the coast of Italy, resulting in 32 deaths. When asked why he abandoned the ship while his passengers were either dying or trying to escape, the captain's excuse was that he fell into a lifeboat. He received 16 years in prison for his role in the tragedy. In 1980, Australian man Kevin Hillier was told by his doctor to take up metal detecting for exercise to strengthen his back. Within just a few weeks of this newfound hobby, he stumbled upon a golden nugget that took more than 2 hours to dig out. Weighing over 60 pounds, the Hand of Faith ended up being one of the largest gold nuggets ever found, worth just under $2 million. In 1851, British inventor Colin Pollinger built a mousetrap that he claimed would work for centuries. 155 years later, the trap somehow managed to catch a mouse while on display in a museum. During World War I, Belgian soldier Optatius Bizens was carrying these coins in his pocket when he was shot. Miraculously, they acted as a shield against the bullet and likely saved his life. Donald Harvey was a nurse from Ohio who killed 37 of his patients with cyanide throughout the 70s and 80s. He was only caught when one of his victims' coroners had the rare genetic ability to smell cyanide. This prompted an investigation and Harvey was exposed as a serial killer. In 1991, actor Phil Lewis, who played Mr. Mosby on The Suite Life of Zack and Cody, collided head-on with another car in Maryland while driving drunk. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison for vehicular manslaughter when the 21-year-old woman he collided with died. Momcilo Gavrich of the Serbian army was the youngest soldier to have fought in World War I. He was able to join at the age of 7 after his whole family was killed by Austro-Hungarian soldiers. Mary and Margaret Gibb were a famous pair of conjoined twins who traveled with Barnum and Bailey in the 1930s. In 1966, it was discovered that Margaret had bladder cancer, but the two adamantly refused to be separated. The next year, Margaret died and Mary followed 2 minutes later, both at the age of 55. In 2021, Corinna Smith discovered that her husband had sexually assaulted her children when they were younger. In response, she filled a bucket with boiling sugar water and dumped it on him while he was asleep, leading to his incredibly painful death. These are some items purchased at yard sales that ended up being way more valuable than anyone knew. A woman named Claire bought a card table for $25 at a garage sale because she thought it looked nice. 30 years later, she found out that it was one of only 6 tables in the world made by furniture makers John Seymour and Son. She flipped it at an auction for $540,000. In 1987, a British woman purchased a costume ring from a yard sale for $5, only to find out 30 years later that it was actually a genuine 26-carat diamond ring worth $960,000. In 2014, a scrap metal dealer from California bought a golden egg for $14,000 at a yard sale, hoping he could flip it for a quick profit. But after finding out the metal was worth far less than he was hoping for, he decided to take it to an antiques expert instead. It turned out to be an extremely rare Fabergé egg that once belonged to the Emperor of Russia, worth an estimated $33 million. In the year 2000, Rick Norsegian was looking to buy a barber chair at a garage sale, but ended up buying 2 boxes of old photos for $45. 4 years later, he discovered that the boxes contained 65 glass plate negatives from famous photographer Ansel Adams, worth right around $200 million. Woody Harrelson's father, Charles, was a professional hitman who once assassinated a federal judge. He was even accused of being involved in the JFK assassination in 1963. A Russian man who tried to rob a hair salon ended up being the victim when the female shop owner overpowered him. She tied him up naked and ended up using him as her sex slave for several days. 21-year-old Japanese woman Nakano Takiko was one of the last remaining samurai warriors. When she was fatally wounded during the Battle of Aizu in 1868, she asked her sister to cut off her head so that her enemies couldn't take it as a trophy. BTK killer Dennis Rader used to install security systems for homeowners. Many of his clients wanted the security systems to prevent the BTK killer from ever entering their homes, unaware that he was the very person installing them. In the 17th century, Lazarus Colorado was convicted of murder and sentenced to death, but he was later pardoned over a strange technicality thanks to his parasitic twin. Lazarus argued that the death would kill his twin, who was innocent. A jury agreed and the man was released. A woman named Claire bought a card table for $25 at a garage sale because she thought it looked nice. 30 years later, she found out that it was one of only 6 tables in the world made by furniture makers John Seymour and Son. She flipped it at an auction for $540,000. In 1987, a British woman purchased a costume ring from a yard sale for $5, only to find out 30 years later that it was actually a genuine 26-carat diamond ring worth $960,000. In 2014, a scrap metal dealer from California bought a golden egg for $14,000 at a yard sale, hoping he could flip it for a quick profit. But after finding out the metal was worth far less than he was hoping for, he decided to take it to an antiques expert instead. It turned out to be an extremely rare Fabergé egg that once belonged to the Emperor of Russia, worth an estimated $33 million. In the year 2000, Rick Norsegian was looking to buy a barber chair at a garage sale, but ended up buying 2 boxes of old photos for $45. 4 years later, he discovered that the boxes contained 65 glass plate negatives from famous photographer Ansel Adams, worth right around $200 million. In 2004, Thomas and Jackie Hawks decided to sell their 55-foot yacht to spend more time with their family. Soon enough, former Power Rangers actor Skylar Delian contacted the couple saying he was interested in purchasing. Tom and Jackie were suspicious of Skylar at first, but they became more receptive when his pregnant wife Jennifer and their other child came to the next meeting, so they agreed to take him on a test run of the boat. Skylar brought with him 2 associates who, unbeknownst to Tom and Jackie, turned out to be former convicts. Once they were on the boat, the 3 men beat Thomas and Jackie, overpowered them with tasers, tied them up, and forced Thomas to sign the yacht away to Skylar. Afterwards, they tied the couple to the boat's anchor and threw them overboard to drown. Their bodies were never recovered. Days afterwards, Delian tried to empty the couple's bank account, but the entire plot was soon foiled when the accomplices confessed to the heinous murders. Thankfully, Skylar and Jennifer Delian will now spend the rest of their lives rotting away in prison. In 2019, a man was using Google Earth to check out his old neighborhood when he stumbled upon something spooky. A car containing the remains of a man who had been missing for 22 years. 40-year-old William Molt was reported missing in 1997 when he failed to return home after leaving a nightclub. 70 years ago, the United States learned about Joseph Stalin's death when a 21-year-old Air Force staff sergeant intercepted a coded message from Russia. That sergeant was none other than singer-songwriter Johnny Cash. In 2013, Margaret Arobio bought a Powerball ticket with random numbers and won the $360 million jackpot, or so she thought. The next day, she saw a media report claiming that nobody had won the jackpot yet. When she called the place where she bought the ticket from, they told her that she bought it an hour after the numbers were drawn. In 1996, a man's body floated up to a boat in the UK seas. There was no identification on the body except for a 25-year-old Rolex Oyster on his wrist. Since Rolex maintained such meticulous service records, they were able to identify the victim and ultimately his killer. One day in the summer of 1984, James Huberty told his wife Etna that he believed he was developing a mental health problem. 2 days later, he asked for an appointment at a San Diego mental health clinic. But the call was logged as a non-crisis since Huberty sounded very polite and stated that he'd never experienced any mental health issues in the past, so he didn't receive a call back that day. The next morning, while at the San Diego Zoo with his family, Huberty told his wife that his life was effectively over. Referring to the clinic's failure to return his phone call, he said society had their chance. Upon returning home, he leaned toward his wife and said, "I want to kiss you goodbye. I'm going hunting for humans." While holding a gun across his shoulder walking out the door, Huberty told his daughter Zelia, "Goodbye, I won't be back." He then drove to the parking lot of a McDonald's near his home and opened fire. James fatally shot 21 people and wounded 19 others before being killed by a police sniper 77 minutes later. The Most Insane Coincidences, parts 26 through 50. While filming for Blade Trinity, Jessica Biel was instructed to shoot an arrow at the camera that was more than 60 feet away. It was protected by plexiglass except for a 2x2-inch square in front of the lens, which Biel unexpectedly managed to hit with a direct bullseye, thus destroying the $300,000 camera. During the Crimean War over 160 years ago, a French and Russian soldier fired at each other and their bullets collided. Just hours after the death of Nintendo CEO Satoru Iwata, a rainbow appeared over the Nintendo headquarters. Fans dubbed it the Rainbow Road to Heaven. Diana Ross, who sang Ain't No Mountain High Enough, lost her husband in a mountain climbing accident. In 2015, a dying fisherman told his two buddies to use his ashes as bait mix. 3 weeks after he died, his friends used his ashes to reel in this 180-pound monster carp, one of the largest ever caught. In 2004, grandmother Dorothy Fletcher suddenly suffered a heart attack on her flight to Florida. When the stewardess asked if there was a doctor on board, 15 people immediately stood up. It was a group of heart doctors on their way to a cardiology conference. In 2012, Anthony Hensley was kayaking in Illinois when he went to check on a swan that was becoming aggressive toward him, causing him to fall out of his kayak. As Anthony tried swimming back to shore, the swan kept relentlessly attacking him until the man sadly drowned. In the 1920s, there was a health drink called Radithor that literally contained radium mixed with water. Its manufacturer claimed the radioactive drink not only provided energy, but also cured a host of ailments including cancer and depression. But the drink was eventually pulled from shelves in 1932 when it started causing its customers' jaws to fall off. While working as a doctor in Canada, John Schneeberger drugged and sexually assaulted one of his patients as well as his own stepdaughter. But he was able to evade arrest for years by implanting a plastic tube in his arm that was filled with another man's blood. The Burnden Park disaster was a human crush that occurred in 1946 at Burnden Park Football Stadium in England. Overcrowding resulted in the deaths of 33 people and injuries to hundreds more. The bodies were then left on the sidelines covered with coats, and the game was later resumed and finished with the corpses still on the field. Being 100 feet in length, the American Dream is the longest car ever built. The party limo includes a swimming pool, mini golf course, a helipad, and can fit up to 75 people inside. Known as the Denmark Strait Cataract, the largest waterfall in the world can actually be found underwater. Varying temperatures cause colder, denser liquid to flow down an underwater slope of nearly 10,000 feet. Avtar Singh Mauni is the proud owner of the world's largest and heaviest turbine. Weighing in at 100 pounds with a length of over 2,000 feet, it takes him more than 6 hours to put on. German surfer Sebastian Studner rode this record-breaking 115-foot wave in Portugal 2018. Most professional surfers would never dare to ride a wave this size due to the high risk of dying if they were to fall. While it's made up of over 40,000 different trees, a 106-acre grove in Utah named Pando is identified as a single organism. The genetically identical trees produce asexually and are connected by a massive underground root system that could be anywhere between 80,000 and 1,000,000 years old. In 2016, an Indonesian pop star died on stage after she was bitten by the king cobra she was dancing with. Instead of seeking medical help, she continued performing for 45 minutes before succumbing to the snake's venom. In 1849, 79 people died when a bridge collapsed as a result of overcrowding in Norfolk, England. The crowd had apparently gathered to watch a clown in a bathtub being pulled up a river by 4 geese. In 2013, a 30-year-old woman from New Zealand died as a result of cardiac arrhythmia. Turns out it was linked to her habit of drinking 2.5 gallons of Coca-Cola every day. In 1797, Persian King Aga Muhammad Khan ordered the executions of 2 of his servants for being too loud. But since it was a religious holiday, he postponed their executions until the next day and made them return to their duties. That night, they murdered the king in his sleep. In 1986, a Soviet pilot made a bet with his co-pilot that he could land the plane without being able to see. so he curtained up all the cockpit windows and ended up losing the bet, since he crashed and killed 70 out of the 94 passengers on board. This was the last photo ever taken of Brooklyn freediver Nicholas Mavoli after attempting to set the American record for freediving at 236 feet deep. He completed the dive and resurfaced, gave the OK sign, attempted to speak, and then passed out. He never regained consciousness and died later that day from pulmonary edema. Dr. Joseph Guillotin was against executions but knew they would happen regardless. So he popularized the guillotine to make executions as quick and painless as possible. Unfortunately, it wasn't as humane as he'd thought, since it was later discovered that the human head can remain conscious for up to 20 seconds after being decapitated. This is a photo of Lyndon B. Johnson being sworn in as president just 2 hours after JFK was assassinated, while standing next to Jackie Kennedy, whose clothes were still stained by her husband's blood. LBJ turned to his friend Albert Thomas and smiled while Thomas smirked and winked back. The White House photographer who took this later called the photograph completely sinister. Mark Wahlberg was addicted to cocaine by the age of 13 and had committed at least 20 criminal offenses by the time he turned 21. In 1988, he was arrested for the unprovoked racist attack of 2 Vietnamese Americans and left one of the victims blind. Marky Mark was initially charged with attempted murder, but only ended up serving 45 days in prison since he was only 16. Here's a video of professional violinist Dagmar Turner playing her instrument while doctors removed a tumor from her brain. They asked her to play the violin during the surgery to ensure that her musical abilities weren't damaged by the delicate procedure. In 2017, an American man consumed a ghost pepper in an eating contest and had to drink 6 glasses of water to cool off. He then vomited so many times that he tore a hole in his esophagus and was rushed to the emergency room, where doctors found his left lung had nearly collapsed. He spent 23 days in the hospital and was sent home with a gastric tube. A Thai man named Jumras Theakot was barely surviving as a fisherman, making only about $13 a day. But one day in 2019, he was walking along the beach and found a strange yellow lump in the sand. He decided to take it home for good luck, and it ended up being 80% ambergris, a super rare substance made from the waxy vomit of a sperm whale. He ended up selling it for a whopping $470,000. In 2013, ABC News reporter Amy Rohrbach had a mammogram taken live on TV to promote breast cancer awareness. It just so happened that she did have breast cancer, and the procedure likely saved her life. Despite being founded the same year in the same city with the same name, Hershey's Chocolate and Hershey's Ice Cream have no affiliation and have actually had multiple legal battles over their shared name. Nikola Tesla was born at midnight on July 10th during a severe thunderstorm. The midwife declared the lightning a bad omen and said he would be a child of darkness. But his mother replied saying, "No, he will be a child of light." In other countries, the mafia will sometimes make witnesses disappear so that they can't testify in court. But Pablo Escobar once made half the Supreme Court of Colombia disappear in the Palace of Justice siege in 1985. Throughout his career as a kingpin, Escobar was responsible for killing at least 4,000 people, including an estimated 200 judges and 1,000 police, journalists, and government officials. Escobar's personal hitman John J. Velasquez was responsible for around 3,500 of those murders. But he was released from prison in 2014 and afterwards became a popular YouTuber. Pablo was making so much money that he lost about 10% of his income due to rats and mold destroying the cash, amounting to around $2.1 billion per year. When Escobar's daughter wanted a unicorn for her birthday, he bought her a horse and stapled a cone to its head and wings to its back. The horse ended up dying from a horrible infection a few weeks later. At his luxurious estate in Puerto Triunfo, Escobar put together a private zoo filled with giraffes, hippos, elephants, and other animals. But after his death, 4 hippos were left unattended on the property and ended up thriving in the local environment. They ended up reproducing, and it's now estimated that there may be as many as 100 hippos roaming the surrounding areas, posing a massive invasive species threat for the local ecosystem. Artifact Porn Highlights, Parts 1 through 25. This 4,600-year-old Egyptian statue was made completely from wood other than the quartz and copper making up the eyeballs. It's just one example of the incredible level of craftsmanship achieved during ancient times. This is the impressive flexibility of a Swedish knight's sabaton from 1560. These taxidermied frogs were found inside of an old French mansion that had been sealed for over 100 years. After a Chinese construction company caused a reservoir to sink 10 feet, a 600-year-old Buddha carving was uncovered. Underwater archaeologists even found evidence of an ancient temple beneath the 12-foot statue. These are the first ever drawings of the moon made by Galileo after observing it through his telescope in 1690. In Switzerland, there's a 500-year-old statue of a man eating a sack of babies, and no one is sure why. This 3,400-year-old Egyptian painting palette is so well preserved that it still contains the remnants of color pigments. These are what the marble steps look like in the Leaning Tower of Pisa after 500 years of people walking on them. This photo shows the incredible details on Michelangelo's Moses statue. There's one small muscle on the forearm that's only visible when you lift your pinky. Because Moses is lifting his pinky, the muscle is contracted. In 1912, a French tailor named Franz Reichelt wanted to prove to the people of Paris that he could design an overcoat that doubled as a parachute. So he gathered an audience including journalists and film recorders before jumping off the Eiffel Tower with his new invention. As you might have guessed, the parachute failed to deploy and Reichelt plummeted 200 feet to the ground, becoming the first person in history whose death was recorded on film. Despite its reputation, no one has died from a confirmed spider bite in Australia since 1979, but hundreds have died as a result of being surprised and startled by them, such as while driving. Tamika Hargrave died while cheating on her husband with her car mechanic. They were getting it on inside of a closed garage while the car was still running, and both eventually passed out from carbon monoxide. Their unclothed bodies were eventually found by Tamika's husband. A Viking leader named Sigurd the Mighty died in such a ridiculous way that the story's been passed down for over 1,000 years. He apparently strapped the head of his defeated foe to his horse's saddle, causing the teeth to graze against his leg as he rode off. Within a few days, Sigurd had succumbed to an awful leg infection. When Queen Elizabeth visited the set of Game of Thrones in 2014, she refused to sit on the Iron Throne. She was simply following an old law that prohibits the Queen from sitting on any foreign throne. Reading the Bible or watching porn are both strictly forbidden crimes punishable by death in North Korea. In 1972, Neil Armstrong visited the town of Longholm, Scotland. When he got there, he was read a 400-year-old law declaring that any Armstrong found in the town should be hanged. Here's a 1955 photo of a woman being ticketed for wearing a bikini on a public beach in Italy. US law requires that eggs sold in supermarkets must be washed, while UK law requires that eggs sold in supermarkets must not be washed. Both do it to prevent salmonella. In ancient Rome, men found guilty of rape had their testicles crushed between two stones. Mississippi didn't make it illegal to buy or sell a child until 2009, only after a woman tried to sell her granddaughter online for $2,000 and a car. Legislators realized there was no law to punish her under, so they finally made one. Dating back to the early 1700s, the Old Gentleman of Rahe is the oldest diving suit in the world. It was once used to inspect the bottoms of sailing vessels. This is one of the 4,000-year-old preserved wagons found near Lake Savan in Armenia. Made completely out of oak wood, they're the oldest known wagons on the planet. The oldest working battery has been powering a bell at Oxford University since 1840. Nobody knows what the battery is made of and doesn't want to risk destroying it to find out. Discovered in 1963, Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey is the oldest known temple in the world. The site was purposely buried around 9000 BC for unknown reasons. However, this allowed the structures to be preserved for future discovery and research. As of now, ground-penetrating radar has revealed that less than 5% of the site has been excavated. Harriet the Galapagos tortoise was collected by Charles Darwin in 1835 while he was discovering evolution. She died at the age of 175 as a beloved member of Steve Irwin's Australia Zoo. In 1944, a group of American airmen were shot down by the Japanese. Out of the 10 men, 9 of them were captured, tortured, executed, and cannibalized. The only man who evaded capture and survived was future President George H.W. Bush. White House police officer Leslie Kofelt was fatally shot while protecting President Truman from an assassination attempt. But he managed to kill the attacker with a headshot from 30 feet away just before dying. As many as 3 U.S. presidents, as well as Abe Lincoln's son, likely died as a result of contaminated water in the White House. Until 1850, there was no sewage system, and a field of human excrement called night soil flowed freely into the water supply. After President Andrew Garfield was shot, his negligent doctors kept digging into the wound with dirty hands and tools, attempting to find the bullet. They gave him such a bad abdominal infection that he had to be fed through his anus for the last 3 months of his life. His assassin openly confessed at a trial of the shooting, but argued that Garfield's doctors had actually done the killing.